Hello. Hello, hello. This is a little bit of a rush. I sat down at 7:59. 7:59 Chicago time. So, the end of the year got away from us a little bit. And so yesterday Brandon here said, you guys know that the salon is tomorrow. And we were like, you know. And so the thing that I thought would be good to talk about was just my mustache is clearly getting a little long here. What I've been thinking about. So it's a little selfish, but the way I can make it be of service is to combine it with some things that I've been able to do that have helped some people in the past year, and hopefully then can maybe offer to help as being helpful moving forward in a wider way. And so the two pieces that kind of fit together that I just wanted to talk about is, it doesn't matter what your politics are. What matters is that, there's kind of an infinite number of degrees of separation. And it does take that to get an entire circle. And so the pendulum moves and the waters kind of ebb and flow. And so one of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is the idea that here, maybe this will help. Maybe that'll help. Feelings of futility are part of that pendulum. But when you kind of take the bird's eye view and you're looking at the way things move back and forth, there's also ebbs and flows of frustration and understanding, complacency and movement. And so one thing that I saw on the internet recently that someone had commented on something, and they were kind of denouncing some religious spokesperson that I don't know who that person was, but it was the comment that spoke to me. And it said something about this uprising of the men who are spoken to, the Jordan Petersons of the world. And the person basically said that all of it is a crock of shit. It's the men that are reacting to this aren't experiencing anything, that's serious. And so the thing that, that kind of made me think about that pendulum thing is that, one of the things, especially for creative people, you're supposed to be able to hold multiple truths simultaneously. And so it can be that the, cliche of the white male, especially of a certain age group, but I mean, anybody, college age for sure, can be experiencing things that they haven't before. And that can be causing distress that is probably like, yeah, welcome to the world, jackass. And the other thing is that there can be people caught up in that net who are experiencing really, really, really serious discomfort. And so one of the things that I think about with that is that what if we started from a place of practicing empathy? And then what if the second thing was to try to figure out how to provide increased awareness? And the reason I used that, the cliche white male thing as a starting point for this thinking is because it's every. I'll give an allegory that hopefully will explain it. Where I used to live, there were a bunch of gangbangers that hung out on the corner. And there was a little kid, the son of one of the guys that was there. And I just was thinking, I wish I could do something that would like be a drop of nourishment into his world that might illuminate a different path. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, who's badass, but also has a strong moral compass that's a role model for a kid? Of course, I landed on Batman. And so the thing that I used to do is I would get him like Batman adventures and things like that. And every time I saw him, I would just give him a comic. And I thought, okay, this is non-threatening. I don't mean this to sound like I'm passing out religious tracts or something like that. But it was one of those things where I was like, at the very least, it's entertainment. And at best, there's some elements of the story of life and of symbolism that maybe he's not getting somewhere else. I guess it is a little like what religious people think they're doing. Anyway, and so all of this is kind of very circuitous, but I guess the thing I'm just trying to get to is the idea that for me, I was really lucky that through my 20s that my best friend was a girl. My friend Kristen was we were inseparable. And through watching her date, with the advent of social media and people sending messages to women that I'm friends with, seeing all of that helped me understand their discomfort in a way that I could never have understood otherwise. And so I think the thing that I'm trying to say about all of this is that whether it's, a stereotype of white men that have no clue about anything that's going on, and then they start to feel marginalized, and then their suicide rates go through the roof. And then, maybe it's the teens with social media that aren't getting exposed enough to stories from people maybe a decade or two ahead of them. Although those people never had to deal with social media, the feelings are the same. And so the thing that I feel like I'm advocating for is the idea of sharing experiences in a really meaningful way, not for social media likes, not what's the lowest common denominator lizard brain that we can trigger. And I think about books that I'd read, people's biographies from previous decades, things like that, and just how much it did increase my sensitivity to other people. And I feel like the biggest thing that we're lacking culturally, I'm not a genius for saying this, everybody's noticed it, is that we're not thinking of ourselves as a planet, as a collective of people, but a series of individuals. It's kind of like Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame turned up to 11. And so, in the irony is that what I'm going to talk about tonight is sharing your individual stories, which sounds like that whack-a-mole thing that I was talking about. But I think the point is that I feel like, the sensationalism's gotten a little out of hand. And I also think that a lot of people have forgotten how to listen. There's nothing we can really particularly do about that. But that at this moment in time, at a point when people are understandably concerned about the direction the country might take, when narcissism and lack of education is about, it's at an all-time high, and it's only going to become more celebrated. in the months to come. The most beautiful thing about that scenario is that ego-driven platform is not sustainable, meaning the infighting that we're going to see politically is going to be unprecedented. I've been around those situations. Obviously, creatives can be like that often. So I feel really confident that we're going to be more okay than we think we are. And so the last thing I'll say before I get into kind of what the meat is I was talking to Douglas Rushkoff the other day, and he said something that really inspired me. Douglas Rushkoff, if you don't know him, wrote a book called Cyberia, Cyberia, 20 years ago, longer. He invented the term social media, and he's just a brilliant media theorist and a really warm and genuine human being. And he said, the internet started out kind of like, the way things like Burning Man or Woodstock or any of that started out weird. It immediately got co-opted by financial interests. And now, with this advent of AI and the mechanization, the ability for people to monetize things is reaching a really peculiar apex where a lot of companies are going to be muscled out. It's going to narrow to these conglomerates. But the most important thing is that he said he feels, and this is something he's going to be talking about a lot this year. So when you hear it, it didn't come from me. It's Douglas's idea. It's the idea that the internet needs to get weird again. You're going to have social media with more bots than there are human beings. You're going to have ads everywhere. The whole thing is going to kind of eat itself. Okay, so then where's the next chapter of that story? Where's the place that the Grant Morrison thinking or the Douglas Rushkoff thinking comes in? And that's starting to figure out how do you inject some humanity into it? How do you start to co-opt some of these technologies for what, for lack of a better word, I'll say are like counterculture things. So that is how I get to the meat of it, which is how do you co-opt this system? How do you focus on empathy? How do you not just say this person deserves what they're getting? Someone could be completely opposite from you ideologically. That's why I started with the white man thing. Like, I'm a white man, so when people immediately marginalize me, it's like, okay, great. But so now you're not going to listen to anything I have to say in a conversation. So it's like, what are we doing? What's the point of that? And, again, that's a super, super complicated issue. That's not really my point. My point is more, and again, this is not something I'm saying, but why are people upset? How did the popular vote go the direction that it did? Like something's not right. And part of it is this lack of, I would say, subtle coercion, meaning I saw an ad the other day on Hulu, and it was a thing for wedding planning, and it had two men holding hands, and it had two women getting married. I thought that's so beautiful to see it creeping into the culture, right? Okay, so if we're the people creating this stuff, if we're the people that are writing the comic books and writing the TV shows and all of that, you can put your story into it. You can be a part of the story. The thing that you've experienced that you wish people would understand can come into that. It can be in your songs. It could be a book just about a year in your life if something interesting happened, all of that. So the thing that I'm getting to is the idea that we should be working both smarter and harder. I think the idea that you're just exhausted and you just kind of want to shut down, like, don't check the news every day. Don't follow the politics. There's nothing we can do about those things. The thing that you can do is start to try to inject humanity into the ecosystem. And so that kind of broad section is like, if you haven't been doing that on your own in any way, you got to start there and then come back. If you've been doing it, if you feel like, I want to communicate some of these things, I want to figure out how to engineer the culture a little bit towards empathy, education. I'm wearing my Think and Read t-shirt. You know, how do you do those things? We have something that didn't exist in the past that serves us as creative people in a way that we couldn't have envisioned before, and that's crowdfunding. So the reason I'm talking about crowdfunding today is that I've had a number of friends who've said, hey, look, I want to do this thing. I'm having trouble negotiate. Like, I'm just going to give a specific example of a very wonderful human being. Had a book that he'd written, had a publisher for. He's like, I need this out. I need to get this out. What would you do? And it was just kind of a problem solving thing on a plate. I was like, crowdfunding. I mean, I feel like a broken record with a lot of that. I feel like I had a friend whose parents, no matter what was wrong with him, they'd give him triamcinolone. So if he had a flu, they'd give him triamcinolone, and we would joke, like, if he broke a bone, they'd rub triamcinolone on it. That was not true, but we would just joke. It was like, that's the only medicine they kept in the house. And I feel like crowdfunding is one of those things. You know, there are really only two big players in that field. I know there's a couple other specialist ones that have come up that things have done well with. So obviously I'm a Kickstarter fan. I like their mechanisms. It's been really easy for me. I know some people who really like Indiegogo. I know other people. What is it? Coop or something? Co-op? I know there is a comic one that, I'll be honest, I had trouble. I felt like a 92-year-old man. I was having trouble kind of setting my account up and stuff. And so I was just like, well, I gave up. I have too many books anyway. So again, if you don't have anything that you want to do, and it's okay for people watching this who aren't creative or trying to put things in the world, buy books as gifts, like, just figure out kind of in your own way, in your community, how can you maybe help some of this move forward. But speaking to the people, if you're a photographer, if you're a poet, if you're a musician, if you're a writer, if you're an actor that wants to make a short film, crowdfunding can help you. I don't mean this to be an infomercial for crowdfunding. I mean it as a response to the frustration and despair that I hear every day from my creative friends. If you were great at business, you'd be in business. So the first thing you have to accept is, okay, I'm probably not wired to do this, but I have to. So if you come into it with that mindset, you just look at it like a checklist. You can follow a recipe, right? Theoretically. If you can't, then you're fucked. I don't know how to help you. If you can follow a recipe, the first thing that you do is you have to some degree, identify some of your audience and start to figure out where allies are there. Get as much information as you can going in. Study campaigns. So say you're going to do a zine and maybe you're working and you've got so little money to cover something. And you're like, man, it sounds crazy, but $100 would change my life. Maybe that's where you are. Then, you start to look at, are there blogs? Are there people that will report on this that I could have lined up as allies. When you set up your campaign, you have to focus on your reward levels. I believe that 85 to 90% of a campaign is decided before it launches. I feel like I'm on Antiques Roadshow with that stuff. I feel like I can look at it and I can guess. I can guess really well. A friend of mine just did a campaign, and I was looking, I'm like, man, everything is wrong on here. And sure enough, barely hit the goal. Thankfully they did. That's great. And then this other friend who was a writer, man, God bless him, did everything I told him. And I don't mean this like in a boast way. It's just an experience thing. I was like, you got to do this, 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 and this. And he did all of it. And it totally exceeded his expectations by far. And so it went from being a frustrating, dead art piece to being something that came into the world, and he made a little bit of money. It wasn't that it was extremely profitable, but it did get funded. So being really realistic about what you're charging for things. Another thing is you have to do higher tiers. There are people like me that'll often go into something and look at a thing and say, I want to give this person $100. And if there's only a $10 tier, I give them $10. I mean, I suppose you could do that thing where you just put in any number and don't even select anything. But for the most part, you really want to kind of lead people to it. So sorry, I'm distracted by my mustache. It's so long and just messy. I didn't realize it till now. It's been the holidays. So that's one thing is stack your tiers, look at campaigns, look at where their money's coming in. You should have your low tier, 3 tiers in the middle, and then a higher tier, and you spread that out. And then we're getting to the thing that's the real meat of this. When I talk about co-opting these evil machines, evil sources, pay for advertising. Instead of being frustrated that this AI has its roots through everything, utilize it. Utilize it. If you pay, you can set things where there's a return on investment. And so like for us with our publishing, we pay for ads at this point. And the reason that we do that is because if we were in a bookstore, we would be paying at least 50%. The reason we're not in more bookstores is that at this point, distributors, some of them want 80% or more. I don't understand the quantities you have to be selling to hit that. Because if we have a book that's a $50 book and they tell us they're going to give us, $6 for it. Like, I don't, and I'm not making that number up. That is some of the things that we've heard. Now, on the other hand, if you go to social media, if you go to Google Ads, if you do those things, you are then in an ecosystem where you can say, okay, if it's a $50 book, I can afford to pay, $10 per customer, and it's still then $40. It's getting closer to a wholesale price. Theoretically, you could get 25 and still be comparable to a distributor. In our case, we don't have that level of markup. But if you do, if you've got something that does. And so I think that I would say, kind of to try to make this last a little longer as a message, whatever it is that you're seeing in the ecosystem that you perceive as a problem, utilize it. I've been having a lot of conversations with ChatGPT. And one of the things that's interesting about that is if it's kind of like the gestalt of human consciousness, if it's the sum, good, bad, and a whole shit ton of spam pulled into a thing, I ask it marketing questions. I ask it slightly sociological questions. And of course, you're going to get a ton of nonsense. but it's been interesting to kind of get under the hood with that a little bit. And so to me, I think because I've had so much experience with that, I'm a little less nervous about it as much as thinking about Richard Metzger said that, and I don't know if he was quoting someone else, but he said he believes that a magician is supposed to use the tools of your time. And I think about William Burroughs with the cut-up technique, or the Dadaists. David Bowie used to do this. He'd flip through the newspaper, randomly look at a page, and then pull a line and write it down, and then do the same thing again and pull a line. And so some of the stories, when you hear songs like 5 Years in Ziggy Stardust, the way that he's pulling these life elements are from a newspaper. He's talked about it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's interesting. It gets you outside of your head. And I mention this as an idea of something that is theoretically terrifying. Is there a way to use it? This doesn't help you if you're a makeup artist working on a film set. But that comes back to the idea of, okay, well, how do you think like a business person at this moment in time? How do you, how do you utilize something that if someone called me right now as a makeup artist, I'd have to think about it. The things that I'm saying apply most of all to people that are a little more independent, meaning music, writing, cinema from the point of view of a director or a producer. If you are, if you're a lighting person, that's very hard. And so I'm going to look at the comments real quick, because that was my half-hour monologue. There's a lot of ideas in there, and it's kind of hard because if I'm speaking to someone individually, I can really key into their specific needs, but I'm trying to give people, like, if nothing else, even if, it used to be in the old days that maybe you could do a blog or something. I think, like, it's not expensive to do something simple and small. And I think the main thing that I'm just seeing is I really think that we're headed for a huge creative renaissance. I think that the movie industry is just fucked 6 ways to Sunday. I think that I'm hearing some of the best music I've heard in decades. And so all of this makes me think, where do you place yourself in that? For me, with things like Le Pater, and even the reconstruction on Caligula, you're trying to introduce the ideas of mysticism and hermeticism. Not that I'm someone that sits around thinking about it in those terms, but the ideas of transformation. For me, it all comes back to personal. I think that the political is the big picture, but I think it has to be personal. It has to be personal transformation. That's the Robert Anton Wilson fan in me. That's the, Hebron's the Prophet is closest I have to a Bible. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Hello, Andrew. Hi, Kat. Hi, Forrest. Yeah, capitalism's rough. Yeah, that's a weird thing, because it is a funny, there's a book that I have that's all of these things that happen in the Russian gulags under communism, and it's like, well, that's not the way to go. You know what it is? I don't mind capitalism. The thing that I don't personally understand is like, I pay more out on Patreon than we take in. Because that's not what this is meant to be. So when I see people making more money than they could reasonably spend in their life, that to me is the problem. That to me is where it is. I feel like it's like this big distended bulbous mass of greed, where it's like, how much can you get? And then what do you get to take with you? You get to take relationships. You get to leave memories behind. So it's like, I guess it's kind of holding truths, multiple truths. Capitalism, I think, is valuable, but man, people get sick over it. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, that's analog handwritten letter. Yeah, it's yeah, man. Computers can be not great. That's one of the things, though, I keep thinking about. Like, there are people. There are a couple bands that were super, super formative to me. Shelley and Orphan and Lions and Ghosts. And Shelley and Orphan is gonna, I don't care who you are, you're gonna lose your mind over their first record. But the guy that was the driving force in that band is someone that I get to chat with a lot. That couldn't have happened if it weren't for social media. So as a tool for connection, it's great. But yeah, we should be using it to connect humans, not just try to sell them more. Excuse me. So Forrest, I got a comment on this. He said, my novel was on bookshelves in most of the best bookstores, but it was only up for 2 weeks. I'll tell you right now. So when the first time I talked to Malcolm McDowell about Caligula, he said, making the movie's only half the battle. Selling it is the other half. And I didn't understand it nearly as much as I do now. If someone said to me tomorrow, I'm going to give you $1 million to make a movie, you have to divide it up, I would spend $100,000 to make the movie and $900,000 to market it. So anyone creative looking at this, you have to go into it thinking, if you can do all this work for free, but you're trying to take it out into the market, it has to be, you have to market it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's it. It's all, if there's 10 records at the end of the day, it's not which is the best record, it's which is the one that people heard about. And you can't make that work long-term with crappy art, but it is a marketing thing. Yeah, Frankie, making money from your labor isn't capitalism. Making money from someone else's labor is capitalism. Well, this kind of leads into kind of my thing is like, I don't have any, I love bookstores. I love bookstores. I spend way too much money. Like if I'm buying books online, I will very rarely negotiate with an independent bookseller, just because what they do is so important. And the problem that I have is that it's kind of like, so when I was running the gallery, my light keeps going up and down. Is that happening on the screen? If you sold your painting for $1,000 when you came to me, if I wasn't making $2,000 in a year, I failed in my head. What a lot of galleries will do is, if you've got an audience and you can sell a painting for $1,000, they look at you and think, great, I'm going to make $500 on that. And then they don't do a lot to build your market, to promote you, to do those things. And to me, it was, I want to make money with someone, not on the back of someone. And I do feel in a large way, the art business, the movie business, to some degree, the publishing business when it relates to distribution, I don't fault people setting whatever terms they have to stay in business. But when you get to the point where the distributors are asking for 80% of something, I can't help them. I can't not make money because their world is falling apart. If someone says to me, yeah, I don't have a great relationship with my gallery, I feel like that's a really common refrain. And I feel like a lot of galleries just kind of take people's mailing lists and keep pushing them. So I think as you expand that larger, that is the problem. The reason we have the people like the Jeff Bezos of the world is they found a way to plug in and take a little bit from everything that somebody is doing. So yeah, I'm just agreeing. And part of my love of crowdfunding is that it really does directly connects a creator to an end person, user, appreciator, whatever. And the thing about that to me is that when you're really small, I feel like it's nearly impossible to get someone to help you. Yeah, it's just nearly impossible. Again, when we were trying to get our books into distribution and we were getting, the distributor I wanted to use was like, we get 80%. I was like, how do people do that? And so at this point, I'm going to turn this light up and see if that stops that a little bit. I don't know. Maybe the room's too dark. We're in the Neue Gallery and they called us, which was incredible. And we have really reasonable terms. I'm kind of getting into the weeds as it relates to publishing, but I guess the point is kind of just agreeing with that idea that the problem is when you're making money on someone else's work and not meaningfully contributing to expand that to the mutual benefit of both parties. That's my statement. Kat is sending me a question. Oh, you guys are talking about bookstores. If I start look at that, I'll just read and not talk. Okay. Kat is posing this as a question, which is a really good one. If you were launching your first Kickstarter for a new business, what are some first things you would do during pre-launch and during the campaign? Business or artist? Like, are you a creative person or do you have a brick and mortar? Do you have like an ongoing service that you're trying to pull together? Let's see if online, both artist and business. Well, I think they're two things a little bit. If you'd asked me this a year ago, I would have said, something that happened all the time is I would get people emailing me that were friends, acquaintances, friends of friends. Hey, I did this Kickstarter. Would you look at it and tell me what I could do? And I would go look at it and they'd be running it for a month and they'd be 2.5 weeks in and have like their mom had pledged. And they hadn't built a mailing list. One person I know hired a PR firm, and I think she sold 4 copies of her book. The PR firm didn't do anything. They charged her like $2,000 or something. It was great money she didn't have. And so the thing that I would say today is that it's so loud in the cacophony of the internet, of social media, that at this point you have to pay to play. I wouldn't think of it as advertising as much as I would say we've utilized these things for free for so long. And people have come up with all kinds of hacks on, if I post at this time, it does this, and that's great. And it does work. It does work. There are people that can pull that off if you're doing it obsessively. But it's that cliche of, if you can't spot the product, you're the product. Well, we're on social media for free, right? We're the product. So if you're on Facebook or Instagram and you're not paying to be there, you're the product. And your role there is to be someone that ads get put in front of. So at this point, with the level of technology being what it is, if you take time to sculpt a really precise arrow and you build really great visuals around it, the algorithm will find people for you. And if you look at our Kickstarter campaigns, you'll see the difference. I can't take all the credit. It's been the synergy. I've spent far more time trying to think about how to make it appeal to a wider audience. Like, I'm not preaching to the converted in terms of, you all know Art Nouveau. I explain what it is. I take the time to try to figure out how to lure someone who would see it in a shop window and want to come inside. How do I engage with them? How do I engage someone? There is always someone that doesn't know what Art Nouveau is. There's always someone that doesn't know what symbolism is. I loved that about Comic-Con. We'd get all these kids that would come up and look at a Muka poster and ask, is that Joe Quesada or is that Adam Hughes? And I'd be like, that's from 1902. Let me tell you what this is. And there were kids that after being at Comic-Con for whatever, we were 14 years, that would come back and say, hey, I bought these books you recommended. I wound up going to art school. That's really exciting. That's a really cool thing. So I try more now than I did before to key into that idea that I'm talking to someone that just hasn't been exposed to something. So that's one really huge part. Then the other part is paying to play. So if we're all using these things for free, now it's time to pay. It's time to pay. You didn't have to pay a subscription fee for Instagram. If you want to utilize it as a tool, if you want to think like a robber baron, if you want to think like a, capitalist, if you want to think like a business person, I remember the first time I was looking at advertising, some of the fees were so high, and I was thinking, I can't pay that much. But it reached a point where I started to look at it and I was like, okay, I can't afford not to pay. So how do I restructure this in a way that it works? That's the broad way I can put it. So, the thing, Kat had mentioned this because she did 2 Kickstarters. One was funded, one wasn't. And it was kind of at a time when we were learning about what marketing looked like today. I don't remember when the first one was, but a couple years ago. And the thing is, Century Guild's a bad example because it's built up 25 years at this point of a mailing list and an audience. But so if I was new coming in, I would be expecting to lose money and expecting to have to pay for advertising. Those would be the 2 things. And I would be making sure that you're not playing insider talking insider baseball. I can't believe I made a sports analogy and messed it up so bad. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like where it's too insular. So try to, that's a marketing thing. You really need to have a marketing head to do that. Like with Animalia, I've got so many books that are so interesting and so beautiful and so many artists that I love. And one of the things that I've always done is I'll read these books that are boring as fuck, but they've got great information in them. And then I tell a story out of this book that I've read, and people are like, that's incredible. Well, if you do that with a dozen books and you pull a dozen stories and then you put those together in a way that someone doesn't need a PhD to understand. And when I say boring as fuck, I just mean like, I don't know who these are written for, but it takes all my concentration and education to follow it. And I guess it's for other academics. And it's like, well, that's fine. But if you're talking about, something really sexy or really esoteric or it's cool. You should put it in that context. And so the thing with Anton Cedar, is he's really marginalized in a sense because he was kind of like 1 foot in this Victorianism that didn't translate, but as a theorist, he was over the top. And they're Art Nouveau dragons. And so all of these, poorly produced Dover type books that reprint things, it's like, that's not exciting. That's not what it feels like. So whatever it is that you have that you're trying to do, where's the marrow of it? Where's the, what's the rock and roll? What's the romantic tension? What's the sexual excitement? What's all of that? And so for me, with the way we kind of marketed Le Pater and the way we did Animalia, it's like Harry Potter. You could be someone that's only marginally interested in Art Nouveau, but we presented Animalia in a way that you would still say, this looks amazing and beautiful. It might be the first Art Nouveau book that you buy. But the way most people would do that is it would be very dry. I had one guy, he's an artist that I respect, but I don't think he likes our books because he likes everything. He's very anal. Not a friend of mine, so you'll never guess who it is. But he likes everything with big white margins. He wants to see the edge of everything. He hates full page. He hates bleeds because even that, 0.125 that you lose, he thinks it's criminal. And I understand that. And I have a ton of books like that in my library. But most people don't view the world that way. Life isn't in a museum. Life is dirty. If you're thinking about the turn of the century, if you're thinking about Weimar, Berlin, if you're thinking about all these things, like they should feel immersive and visceral, and people should leave your thing with a sense of the era in some way. That's my opinion. I'm ranting. So I'm going to go to the, oh my God, what mistakes did we make on our first Kickstarter campaign? You don't want to know. A lot. It was also it was very funny. And Theodore, thank you. Animalia is now retitled Fantasia and Animalia. It doubled in page count. Doubled. I don't know if you saw any of the updates, but it did so well. It really exceeded our expectations. And I was just like, it has to be. It is a common thing that when we do something well, other people then do their version of it. I've seen that happen more than once at this point. And already someone's got a downloadable Anton Cedar thing. That's like, where'd you get the images? You source them from the internet? Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't like that. I like having the originals, talking to the museums, getting everything to make a really great package. And with Animalia, I was like, man, Anton Cedar did some other cool stuff. Most of what he did would really only be of value academically to an illustrator, because they're like, how do I draw wheat in a circle or something like that? Like, they're not great to look at, but one of the things they used to have to do, he was an instructor at a school. That was kind of his big claim to fame. And he would make the students do flower arrangements and draw them themselves. So there's a lot of the way the natural world related to design and shape. There was a huge part of his oeuvre, his body of work. And it's important academically, but I'm looking more at what's the thing that would make people romantically interested, super excited. Where's the excitement? Where's the dirt? And so it's like, it's not just the dragons. He did all of this other cool stuff. He did owls. He did, some fairy tale related things. Probably my favorite piece that he did is a Cinderella piece. That's just amazing. It's probably my favorite piece by him. And I was like, we got to put all this in. So it took me longer because there were things I had to track down, and we tracked down some sketches for some of his, preliminaries and things like that. But I'm very excited about it. Yes, it's renamed Fantasia and Animalia because there's a lot of fantasy art in there. So I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Printing takes longer now than it ever has. So I don't think they're going to be getting shipped to people till summer. I'm not happy about it, but it's kind of where we are with, like, that's the stuff that's out of our hands. But so back to Forrest's question. Let me think of some funny. I mean, there's that one mistake that is, it's kind of, it's personal to someone. I'll tell it just because I've already let in, and I hate when people don't do that. But no, I can't. It's going to kill you. You're going to hate me. But someone involved in the process had messed something up, and I didn't monitor it because at that point I felt like this is an opportunity for them to do it. So for me, a big mistake was being distracted by the antique business and needing to have a thing rectified that became very expensive and ate up whatever profit we might have found in there. That's a great thing. Trying to read the label from inside the bottle in a marketing book, Kat says. And that's kind of what I definitely did that. So we did well with Cursed Pirate Girl. That was our first Kickstarter. And the thing that happened there is Kickstarter was really new. People didn't know what it was. And we spent more time explaining what Kickstarter was than selling the book itself. And then from a fulfillment point of view, the minute the campaign ended, everybody started writing in because their credit card got charged. And we're saying, hey, I don't have this book yet. And I'm like, yeah, because you crowdfunded it. And they're like, what's crowdfunding? So the challenges that we had in the beginning were very different than as I got into it. I think that the first one, when we did it, it was the highest money that anybody had achieved for a comic book campaign. So I feel like we did great. We did really great with it. I think that the real solution to the problem we had at that moment is social media wasn't as clogged, so we could use that. Cursed Pirate Girl is it appeals to really wide audience. A lot of people that were pledging on that weren't even comic people. It just sounds fun. And Jeremy Bastian is one of the best artists I've ever seen. There's another world where that guy is unbelievably famous. And I know that's kind of a criminal thing that happens to a lot of artists. I still can't even articulate how special his work is. It's really, really, really good. And then we started doing some exhibition catalog things. And that was kind of like have to get the word out. It wasn't even really as much that we needed the money to pay for it, but it was like, I think I kind of maybe harbored some secret feelings of being a real publisher. But the biggest thing was just we were doing these cool shows. We were in Chicago. We had our Comic-Con audience. And I just kind of wanted people to get to see it. Like we did one catalog. It was really fun. And we had like Doc Hammer, the Venture Brothers writer, illustrator, Steve Kilby, the musician, Gail Pataki, Jeremy. I think I did an interview in there with Dave McKean for his movie Luna. And it was just the artists that were kind of in our ecosystem and just wanting to share that a little more. And so I think that the only things that I did back then that I would say, I don't want to say even that they were mistakes, but they were challenges, was dealing with like shipping, like undercharging for postage was a huge one. It's still like the biggest thing that I would tell anybody. Yeah, like, packaging and stuff like that costs way more than you think it will. Not factoring in Kickstarter fees. Kickstarter takes 5% and Stripe, the credit card company, takes 5%. So 10% off of the top. And I think that if I were telling someone now what to watch out for from these lessons, it would be, you got to be prepared for the real estate it's going to take. If you're making books, for example, that's a lot of boxes of books you got to find a place for. You got to have a place to pack them. You've got to have manpower that can help you. You got to have some friends and family that you can, invite over and, get them stuffing envelopes or whatever that is. But I feel like those things are technical. Always assume it's going to cost more than you think. That's why I say kind of go into the first one thinking you're going to lose money. The other thing is you have to really take into account the real estate and the time that it's going to take. Customer service, fulfillment, all of that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of work. But you do it, like, that's the exchange. You don't have a bookseller maybe selling your book, but you do this work and then you kind of keep the money. And so you would say, yeah, but all that keeps me from writing. And I'm saying this in a funny way. Like, what else were you doing? Like, that's the point. Is like, if we as creatives are quite often unemployed, I would rather always in my life have filled the time with something than be just hemorrhaging money. And so if what you're doing in that other time is something that supports your art, well, then that's worthy of your time and you're getting money for it. Like, that's all positive. I totally. Oh, and then so Kickstarter, and then this is the last thing, is that you got to have a thick skin in the same way that as a creative person, like if you're an actor or a musician, you just have to assume people are going to be shitty. There's always, like, I don't know. I shouldn't say always. It's less now that we have a following. It's a lot less when we do something that picks up new people. If anything doesn't go exactly as you'd expected, there's always going to be people that are just like did not get hugged enough when they were kids. They're going to be miserable and want to yell at you, but not really want it fixed as much as they want to vent. And that's become increasingly less common as crowdfunding has gone on. Most people are extremely generous and extremely supportive and kind. But you just got to be prepared that there's going to be, really, depending on the size of your thing, anywhere from probably 3 to 8 people, which if you've got 300 people, if there's 300 people and 3 of them are really cranky, you're probably at 1% to 2%. But we've had campaigns at this point where even being late or things like that, everybody's been wonderful. And I think part of that is just because we've been doing it enough. But it does happen. So I don't know how helpful that was. It's kind of the stuff that's been on my mind. I have a thing written on my board in the kitchen that says transform burden into opportunity. And it's like, what's the thing that's in the way? We've been doing a lot of like liquidation type stuff in our web store. And part of that is like, we found some boxes of old Clive Barker books. And it was like, we're moving these around. Where are we going to store them? What are we doing? And it was like, you know what? It's time to just let them go. And so we just put them up at retail price and they all sold. It was great. And I just thought about that. Well, that was a nice, instead of paying for storage, we turned it into money that could go to something else. And that's when that really clicked in my head and when I wrote that. And that's the thing I've been thinking about. Again, I'm not upset by AI. It's like, well, how do I use it? Instead of pointing at the villain on the hill and saying they're using this tech, well, how can we use it? Like, what's the left-handed path? What's the subversive way to beat them at their own game? And also, maybe everybody needs to read The Invisibles again. I'm not looking at this like us and them as much as, it's restoring empathy is important. I think that's really going to be an important thing in the next decade. And I think that the human return to creativity is going to be distinct. I really believe that. I'm not saying it to make myself feel better. I think like when Ben Affleck says AI is not going to destroy the movie industry because it's about storytelling, he's out of his fucking mind. That business is dead because it's been based on money for so long. But if you like watching movies shot on 8mm about, goats that talk to flowers or something like that, your time is coming, because smaller audiences can support creatives to do things. So we definitely, if you have not checked out the Discord server, please head over there. I have to thank Kat for doing such a great job there. I do try to get in there to chat, but even more than anything is it's a way for all of us to talk to each other a little more about these things, for you guys to meet each other. And I'm super happy to answer questions there. So I don't care how specific it is. If someone's like, what paperweight do you recommend for this kind of book? Like, I'm happy to talk about that stuff. So thank everybody for being here. We've gone 2 minutes over, and tonight was weird. It was kind of a long rant, so I appreciate your patience. I don't know how much of it made sense. A lot of it are things that are in my head that are really, I kind of went a little deeper in this in terms of trying to really lay out some things that are in my practice. If some of it didn't make sense, discard it, but hopefully there's a couple things in there that might apply to something you're dealing with. And if you need clarification on anything, just put it up in the Discord, and I'm happy to chat more about it. First Thursdays of every month. We'll see you guys really soon, and have an awesome campaign launching in 12 days, called Spellbound, which is 1970s paperbacks I'm doing with my friend Astralize. January 14th. That's when it launches. And it's going to be a good one. It's going to be really good. And I'm sorry about the screen. We'll fix that for next time. So anyway, thank you for being here. And I'll see you guys over in the Discord. Good night.